after January 6th, it looked as though Republicans overwhelmingly were going to reject Donald Trump, Republican politicians. Instead, virtually all Republicans have fallen in behind Trump's perspective that the 2020 election was stolen. Now, is it on the basis of evidence and truth? No. They got a sophisticated reinterpretation of Trump's claims, which made the point that voting regulations were changed and not by legislatures prior to the 2020 election. So they found a sophisticated, tenable way of falling in behind Trump's line, which unites people on the right. And it has absolutely nothing to do with the empirical truth of what they're saying, just like the power of Christianity or Judaism or some yoga cult does not depend upon the empirical truth of what they state their tenets are. So saying that you're opposed to abortion is a much nicer way of saying I hate black people.
I don't think it's quite that. The thing of it is this: I have been called a racist, not so much by people on the woke left, but by hardcore quote unquote pro-lifers. These people, by and large, are fanatically anti-racist, and they make arguments they'd expect to hear from the woke left, but they're just thrown into this anti-abortion perspective with some obviously changes from the typical left-wing pro-choice point of view to a supposedly socially right-wing, supposedly pro-life point of view. And the people on the quote unquote right today who are anti-abortion are all about black rights and the white man oppressing the black man through abortion, black genocide through abortion, which is promoted by Margaret Sanger, who actually disliked abortion and advocated against it. Go figure. But today's anti-abortion folks definitely are not motivated, generally speaking, by some animus toward blacks. They are, if anything, Afro-Amero philic.
Well, let me challenge you. Let me challenge you on that. Do you think that most people who want to make abortion illegal vote Republican?
Of course not.
Okay.
I mean, of course they do. Of course.
Okay, so they are dominantly on the right. Generally speaking, John Derbyshire made this elementary point. There are tens of millions of Americans who don't much care for black people, and these people overwhelmingly vote Republican.
Yeah, but the people who are very committed to the anti-abortion cause, the activists who can't stop talking about it, they, number one, they support abortion's ouster because they say, and they really believe this, that abortion is anti-black and that they are fighting as part of a new quote-unquote civil rights movement. If you want to have a population that's more traditional, I'll put it that way in the U.S., abortion is a great way of getting it, considering who gets the abortions, the demographics of who gets the abortions. And I talk about the demographics of who gets abortions quite a lot, and there are many different ways of putting it. But speaking specifically about ancestry, if you want things to go back to the way they used to be, abortion is a way of having that done because of who gets the abortions. There would be a certain group that would be much more numerous today if not for abortion. And for people who are anti-abortion to claim that, for people who are anti-abortion to actually dislike blacks and vote Republican and oppose abortion rights out of some way of not being able to voice their dislike for American blacks doesn't make any sense, because what they're advocating for regarding abortion is something that would make the black population grow exponentially, which is to say banning abortion nationwide.
Right, but people's adaptations don't have to make rational sense. People have these inchoate reactions to the world around them, and that's what drives their politics. I mean, I think you'd agree with me that tens of millions of Americans don't particularly care for black people, and that most of these people who vote of that group do vote Republican.
Certainly, they do. I don't disagree with that at all. I just think that the people who are very passionately anti-abortion, these people would. I'm telling you the truth, Luke, because I have had the terrible misfortune to speak with them at length, and they would rather their girl bring home their young girl, their adult daughter, bring home a black guy who is conforms to very unfortunate stereotypes, but is pro-life, rather than a white fellow who's very upstanding and going places, but is pro-choice. These people believe this shit. They do, and it's quite it's bizarre. It's actually anti-white in its own way.
But it's not bizarre because they're simply responding to incentives. You're talking about activists who are in media spotlight or public spotlight, so they have to fight.
Regular people too who are activists. They don't have to be
Right, but
famous.
they're in a social circle where to be racist is completely unacceptable. If you're a professional, if you're college educated, it's completely unacceptable to be outwardly racist. So they're going to have to go over and above and beyond perceptions of Republicans and pro-life people as being racist. So they, will go to ridiculous lengths to try to show their, non-racist credentials. Like, we're all responding to incentives. They're responding to incentives. I'm responding to incentives. The reason that these people are saying what seem to be absolutely ridiculous things are perfectly rational adaptations to the set of incentives that they operate under. And in a different circumstance, they would react differently.
And from Clemens Wenzel to Luke, do you think of Richard Spencer as an edgy liberal, a contrarian, or as something different?
I think of him as a contrarian, as a something of a shock jock, as someone who lives to make an edgy take, and I think he's more interesting than 98% of commentators on the alt-right. So yeah, I listen to Richard reasonably regularly, not as a source of truth or wisdom, but just like, oh wow, that's an interesting perspective, one that I never would have thought of. So I find a lot of like entertainment value listening to Richard. I don't see him as a source of wisdom and truth.
Do you think he takes himself seriously? I mean, do you think he really believes what he says at this point?
Yes, I think he takes himself very seriously.
Is that supposed to be a joke, or is that your honest
No,
opinion?
absolutely, absolutely. He takes himself tremendous. He's got a tremendous sense of gravitas. He comes from a theatrical background. He wanted to be a theater director, and so he has more musicality in his voice. He has more of a sense of gravitas in his presentation. You kind of get the sense that he's singing his words, on stage in a musical. There's that level of theatricality in his presentation. And yeah, I think he sees himself as a Nietzschean, great man in history.
I think he does, although I think that what he's saying now, it's so totally contradictory to what he used to say that it seems to me he's trying to get back into polite society, from which he sprang. He comes from a very affluent, well-respected background, but his life has been destroyed by his activism. And I think now he really, really wants to go back to the way things were, wants to put the toothpaste back in the tube, and he understands that in order to get back to where he used to be before he became well known politically, he has to conform to what polite society has become, which is wokeness.